All right, welcome everyone. We're diving deep today into some pretty intense legal waters this time.
Sounds intriguing.
You sent in some documents, and let me tell you, they are dense.
Oh, I bet.
But never fear. We are going to extract the most fascinating bits for you.
The juicy stuff.
Yeah. It seems like someone is pushing back hard against a court case.
You're right. This is way beyond like a parking ticket, the
Right.
documents format, and the language, unusual,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Okay.
It mixes legal terms,
Mhm.
biblical references, even mentions historical figures.
Wow.
This is not your typical legal approach.
No kidding. Okay, let's dive into this word soup, shall we?
Let's do it.
Right away, we hit phrases like void ab initio. I mean, what does that even mean?
That's Latin for void from the beginning.
Oh, okay.
So the sender is claiming that whatever legal action they're facing is invalid, right from the start.
Oh, interesting.
They're essentially saying the whole case is built on shaky ground.
Interesting tactic.
Hmm.
Then we have this, cestui qui vi trust.
Yeah.
I feel like I need a history degree and a law degree for this one.
It does have deep roots. In English, legal history. It's a type of trust where someone's assets are managed for their benefit while they're alive.
Okay.
But how it's being used here, in a modern context, is pretty unconventional, to say the least.
Unconventional. Okay, and well, it gets even wilder. We have this special limited visit to court. Sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
Definitely a bold move. The sender is basically saying they won't submit to the court's authority unless very specific conditions are met.
Really?
And they're spelling those conditions out very clearly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of spelling,
Yeah.
there's a lot of emphasis on specific wording and capitalization.
Yes.
For example, Nigel Allen
Yeah.
versus Nigel Allen clause in all caps.
Right.
What's the deal with that?
This isn't just a stylistic choice. It goes straight to the heart of their argument about jurisdiction and the legal distinction between a natural person and a legal entity. They're claiming that Nigel Allen clause, in all caps, represents an artificial entity created by the state, separate from the living individual, Nigel Allen.
So they're basically saying there are two Nigels here.
Exactly.
Right.
And they're arguing that they, as the natural person, aren't bound by the same rules as this artificial entity.
Wow.
They're challenging the very foundation of the court's authority over them.
This is starting to feel like a legal thriller.
A little bit, yeah.
I'm already hooked.
Yeah.
What else is in this document that jumps out at you?
There's a lot more to unpack.
Yeah.
I'm particularly interested in the references to the common law of England
Okay.
and the Bill of Rights 1689.
All right.
It seems like the sender is trying to use historical legal concepts to support their arguments.
Okay, so we're going from legal jargon
Mhm.
to historical deep cuts. I'm sensing a pattern here. They're meticulously choosing their words, like they're building a fortress of language to defend themselves.
That's a great way to put it. They're carefully crafting their message, blending legal terms, historical references, and even biblical passages
Wow.
to create a compelling, if unconventional, argument. This is definitely a deep dive we'll need to take step by step.
I agree. Okay, my head is spinning a bit.
Yeah.
We've got the separation of Nigel Allen, the person,
Yeah.
and Nigel Allen clause, this entity. And now they're bringing in historical legal documents.
Right.
This is like a legal puzzle box.
It is a bit of a puzzle.
Yeah.
That's often how these types of arguments work. They
Yeah.
weave together different threads to build a case. That challenges conventional legal thinking.
Okay, so let's talk about those historical references.
What-
They mentioned the common law of England
Right.
and the Bill of Rights 1689. What are they getting at here?
Well, the common law of England is a system based on precedent,
Ah.
meaning past rulings influence future ones.
Okay.
It developed over centuries and was brought to many parts of the world, including Australia, during colonization.
So even though Australia has its own legal system, these old English laws still have some relevance.
Yes, common law principles still influence Australian law today.
Okay.
The sender seems to be arguing that certain rights and freedoms existed before modern governments,
Yep.
and those rights are still valid.
So they're looking back to these older documents
Yeah.
as a source of authority,
Mm-hmm.
a way to challenge the current system.
Exactly. They're invoking history to question the legitimacy of the court's power over them. They are saying, hang on, these older rules protect me. in ways that the current system might not.
This ties back into their whole argument about jurisdiction, right?
Exactly.
They're not just questioning the specific charges against them, but the courts, very right, to judge them in the first place.
You got it.
Okay.
The sender is essentially saying, you don't have the authority to put me on trial. They're challenging the foundation of the legal process.
But how can someone just declare themselves exempt from the legal system? Doesn't everyone have to follow the law?
Well, that's a key point of contention here.
Okay.
The sender is asserting their sovereignty as an individual, claiming they haven't consented to be governed by the system as it stands.
Really?
It's a bold claim.
Yeah.
And one that courts don't often look kindly upon.
I can see why this kind of argument would be controversial.
Yeah.
But I also understand the frustration with feeling powerless against a system that can seem really complex and confusing.
Absolutely, and that's where things get tricky.
Yeah.
It's one thing to assert your rights, but another to do so effectively within the existing legal framework.
Right, so what should someone do if they're facing a situation like this? Where do they even begin to untangle all of this?
First and foremost, you need to seek professional legal advice.
Okay.
This document raises really complex issues, and it's not something you want to navigate on your own.
Right.
A lawyer can help you understand the arguments, assess your options, and figure out the best course of action.
It sounds like we're wading into pretty deep waters here, both legally and conceptually.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that word treason, which pops up several times.
Yeah.
That's a very serious accusation.
It is. Treason is typically defined as betraying one's country,
Right.
and it carries heavy penalties.
Okay.
However, in this context, it's likely being used rhetorically to emphasize how strongly the sender feels about the injustice they perceive. They're really trying to hammer home the idea that their fundamental rights are being violated.
Okay, so treason is more of a dramatic flourish than a literal accusation of treason against the government.
That's how I'd interpret it. It's about highlighting the emotional weight of their argument, not about calling for a revolution.
Got it. This is fascinating, but also really complicated.
It is.
I'm starting to see why legal documents can feel so intimidating.
They can be. Legal language is often dense and technical, even when dealing with straightforward matters. Now imagine trying to decode a document that deliberately challenges those very conventions.
No wonder you need an expert to help break it down.
Right.
Speaking of breaking things down, let's talk about this. Fee schedule attached to the document.
Okay.
They're putting a price tag on things, like recording their image or voice, even detaining them.
Yeah.
Is that even legal?
That's a great question. And the answer is probably not.
Okay.
It's unlikely a court would uphold these fees.
So what's the point of including them? Is it just for show?
It's probably more about asserting control.
Okay.
The sender is trying to dictate the terms of engagement to create financial consequences for those who violate their perceived rights.
This is less about collecting actual money and more about making a statement, like saying, you can't just trample on my rights without facing some kind of pushback.
Exactly. It's about challenging the power dynamic, and it ties back to their overall strategy of using language to assert their autonomy.
Okay, so we've got a clearer picture of the sender's strategy.
Right.
They're using specific language, historical references, and even bold claims like treason and these fees to try and shift the balance of power in their favor.
You're picking up on the key themes here, but we're not done yet. There's still more to unpack, especially when it comes to the biblical references and the sender's overall goal.
Well, deep divers, get ready because this deep dive is about to get even deeper. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore the sender's use of biblical references and what all of this might mean for you. All right, let's tackle this last piece
of this legal puzzle, huh?
Yeah.
We've seen how the sender is using legal terms and historical references, but now they're bringing in biblical passages, which is not something you see every day in a court case.
Yeah, it's definitely unusual.
Yeah.
But remember, they're trying to build a case that goes beyond conventional legal arguments. They're appealing to a higher authority, so to speak.
I'm particularly struck by how they use scripture to support their claims about their affidavit standing as truth.
It's almost like they're saying, this is the absolute truth because the Bible supports it.
That's a good observation. They're blending spiritual and legal ideas,
Yeah.
asserting that because their affidavit is unchallenged, it must be true,
Yeah.
according to both legal and biblical principles. They even try to connect specific biblical passages to things like judgments in commerce,
Right.
creating a unique blend of spiritual and legal reasoning.
It's like they're creating their own legal system
Yeah.
based on their personal interpretation of both law and scripture.
In a way they are. It's about asserting their autonomy
Oh.
and challenging the legitimacy
Right.
of the existing legal framework. It's a bold move, but
Yeah.
whether it holds up in court is another question entirely.
Right, because at the end of the day, courts follow established legal procedures and precedent, not necessarily someone's individual interpretation of scripture.
Exactly. But even if the strategy isn't legally sound, it highlights the deep frustration some people feel with systems that can seem complex, unfair, or even rigged against them.
I think that's a really important point. We talked a lot about the sender's tactics, but what's the bigger picture here? What can we learn from this, even if we don't agree with everything they're saying?
This document is a powerful reminder of the importance of understanding our rights and the legal system. It encourages us to think critically about authority and to be willing to challenge it when we believe it's overstepping its bounds. It also highlights the power of language and how it can be used to make a statement, even if that statement isn't ultimately successful in a legal sense.
So it's about more than just winning or losing a case.
Absolutely. This document sparks a broader conversation about the balance of power between individuals and institutions. It asks us to examine our own assumptions about how systems work and to consider whether those systems are truly serving us well.
That's a pretty profound takeaway. It's like this document is a mirror, reflecting back some fundamental questions about justice, fairness, and how we navigate complex systems that can often feel overwhelming.
You put it perfectly. It's about recognizing that we have a voice and that we can use it to advocate for ourselves and for a more just world.
Well, Deep Divers, we've reached the end of our journey through this dense legal labyrinth.
We made it.
Yes. What key insights should we carry with us as we resurface?
First, remember that language has power. Every word, every punctuation mark can carry significant weight, especially in legal context. Second, history matters. Our legal systems are built on layers of historical precedent, and understanding that context can be crucial when navigating legal challenges. And finally, never underestimate the importance of critical thinking, question assumptions, challenge authority, and always seek a deeper understanding of your rights and how to exercise them effectively.
That's fantastic advice. This deep dive has been eye-opening, to say the least. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping a more just and equitable society. And that starts with being informed, engaged, and ready to challenge the status quo when necessary.
Well said. And remember, the journey to understanding our rights and systems is ongoing. There's always more to learn, more to question, and more to discuss.
That's true.
So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
Great advice. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for listening.